Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. We're here with another guest host, Marisa Duncan, and she'll get into a little bit of her background. But she comes from us in the background of being a systems engineer who went and did her MBA and is now an entrepreneur. So we'll dive into each one of those topics later on. But first, we'll get to know her a little bit more, what she was like as a kid, and maybe how that influenced some of her decisions and her journey in the process. So thanks, Marisa, for joining. And if you don't mind kind of giving us a little bit of a background and overview of yourself, and maybe start with like, what were you like as a kid?
Yeah, thanks, Luki, for having me on here. It's a pleasure to be here. So a little bit about me. I guess I'll start with where I'm currently, and then go and answer about how I was as a kid. So currently, I am a technical virtual assistant, and I have my own business where I help entrepreneurs with the technical parts of their business that they just don't want to deal with. And so as a kid, I have always been super curious. I've always wanted to delve into anything new. And I remember like when I was 10 learning about HTML, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever. And I would just dive right in writing that Hello World program. And I was also super into music, and I was super into like little craft kits and DIY projects. So anything I could learn, I would try to.
So you're a bit of a techie and then also on the creative side. So it looks like it's kind of a mixed bag there where, or is it really just learning anything? Like if someone showed you a new kind of shiny object, you're like, ooh, let me figure that out.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I like to try things out. And then, I mean, I have kept some of the things like I've sung all my life, and I like to deepen that skill. So I think it's definitely a balance of shiny object and, focus in on something and get good at it.
Cool. And what were some of the influences you had growing up? So maybe parents, brothers and sisters or something, because you ended up in a degree in system design engineering, right? Which is, well, I mean, pretty competitive and tough to get into. So that must have mean that you were pretty good as a student in there, because you need pretty high grades to get into something like that. But did that come from, or the interest in engineering, did that come from family, or is that just like you tinkering about, or I don't know, TV and MacGyver or something? I don't know, I'm making stuff up. But where did that influence come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I grew up in Waterloo, and Waterloo engineering program has very good outreach programs. So I remember going to their summer camps as a kid. I remember going to women in engineering events when I was in middle school. And so that's kind of where I learned what an engineer was, that they would solve problems and that they use math and science, which I was good at in school, to solve problems. So that's kind of the initial reason. I've also was interested in international development as a kid. I heard about Free the Children and Craig Kielburger when I was around the age that he started that organization. And I thought that was incredible how he just learned about a problem and had to go find that solution. And so I thought that engineering would be a good way to use the skills that I was good at in school and apply it to big world problems. And so that was my initial drive for engineering. I would also say that my dad is in physics and electronics, so I had that like techie background as well.
Cool. So you're sort of, well, not exactly following your father's footsteps, but because of all the influences of the environment, Waterloo region, the university had those programs. And tell us more about the kind of international development. Why didn't that become kind of the predominant thing that you wanted to go to, and how did like engineering kind of triumph over that in terms of a calling or a choice?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. I definitely consider international development programs as an option in university. I just didn't have a clear direction of where I wanted to see myself in international development. And I'd also heard about organizations like Engineers Without Borders as an opportunity for engineers to get involved in that. So I figured engineering would have more opportunities available. And so at that point, when I didn't know exactly what I wanted to leave as many doors open as possible.
Cool. So as you're kind of in that realm, you obviously picked Waterloo because they had a good outreach program, or were there other areas that you were considering as well, and why kind of systems design versus all the other types of engineering that were out there?
Yeah, so I narrowed in on systems design pretty quickly.
Okay.
I like to think big picture. I like to see how seemingly different areas can be connected together. And in systems design, like prides itself on being interdisciplinary in that way. And it's also very human focused engineering. So we talk about like human factors in engineering. And so how can we design something that takes into account the psychology of the people using it? So when you think about like a plane and all the different controls that a pilot has, there's in any certain plane crashes, some plane crashes aren't actually because of a technology failure necessarily, but it's actually because of a human error. And so how can we like minimize that by designing that interface properly so that the pilot can safely fly the plane? And so I think there are those kind of psychology factors, and engineering was also a drive for me.
Cool. And if folks listening or were interested in a career in that area, or are contemplating, like, what are some of the things that they could be asking themselves, or what are the things that you knew about yourself that say, you know what, this leans me more to that side, right? So there's obviously the fact that, well, engineering gives you more options. Like maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But if it's more like, hey, if you really have an interest in this, then systems design engineering would be really your cup of tea. Are there any questions that you would suggest for folks to say, yeah, these are a couple things that would help you guide yourself to that path?
Yeah, I think thinking about people in my class, it's a lot of the people when they first entered systems, it was like, well, I didn't have a specific drive towards just computer technology, or I didn't have a specific drive just towards mechanical systems. And so I guess we are the kind of people who have a lot of diverse interests and would consider ourselves, I guess, well-rounded. And I know that sometimes comes with a little bit of uncertainty and fear of becoming kind of a generalist with no specific skills. But I do know lots of people have found their place in different industries from my class and from previous classes. And I think through the co-op program, especially, you kind of figure that out through the jobs that you have about what you want to do. So I guess for anyone thinking about systems design engineering, if you know you want to solve problems with technology or with math and science in any form, but you're not specifically drawn to a specialist type of engineering, then I would suggest that as an option for you.
Cool. So food for thought for folks. So you end up doing that systems design engineering degree. Hopefully had a bunch of co-ops in there, and then eventually you decide to take your MBA and go from kind of technical to business. So can you walk us through a little bit of that journey? And well, there's probably a whole bunch of steps along the way, but just walking us through kind of the MBA part of it.
Yes, the MBA part of it. I'll start with my co-ops. So the co-ops really helped shape my interests, and I helped figure out what I wanted and what I didn't want. And I think figuring out what you don't want is just as important. And when I was in co-op, what I really enjoyed doing was when I got to be at the interface of people and technology rather than just deep in the weeds with technology. And so any kind of job where I got to interact more with people than just be potentially just coding or just working on a technical system, I found much more engaging for me. And when I thought about kinds of jobs that would do that, I'm thinking more so the hybrid jobs like product management, where you deal with the business side of things as well as working with technical specialists. So I did my last co-op position in product management at a technical startup, at a tech startup, and I really loved that position. I know that some product managers do have their MBAs, and I had an opportunity to do MBA. When the pandemic hit, my plans for the next year were canceled, and so I thought about what I wanted to do in that next year, and thought that this would be a good option to do, especially while the world was in a crazy time. So.
And did this MBA have require any work experience beforehand, or is this one of the MBAs where didn't? Because I hear co-op and then straight to MBA, but my understanding is most MBAs require like 2 years of work experience or something. Is that fair for yours, or
Yeah,
not?
that is true. So I went to Laurier, and they have two different types. They have the full-time program without co-op, which requires 2 years of
Okay.
experience, and then also the co-op program, so you don't need the 2 years experience. However, I actually did have just exactly 2 years work experience through my co-ops. So I was in the full-time
Gotcha.
1-year program. Yeah,
Gotcha. So they counted the co-ops as work experience. It doesn't
exactly.
mean you had to graduate and have work experience. The work terms have counted. So that makes sense. So you're humming along. You think product management's a fit. You take your MBA, and then what?
Yeah, so actually before I started my MBA, during
Okay.
the summer of 2020, I was, I guess, contemplating the entrepreneur route. I mean, I'd always been contemplating that as an option, but I just never thought I had like the next big idea. Like I always thought entrepreneurship had to be like, especially at Waterloo, they promote the engineers and other
Sure.
entrepreneurs who have this, you know, $1 million, $1 billion idea, and then build a company, get a lot of venture funding. And I always thought like, oh, that might not be me. Like I don't have the next big thing. I don't necessarily want that pressure either to have that much funding and be a CEO of a big corporation. I never really thought that would be what I wanted, but I started to learn about other entrepreneurs who have more so a lifestyle business where they, you know, provide enough to live comfortably, and have a decent work life balance. And so I thought maybe that's something I can get into. And how can I do that in the middle of a pandemic when I don't want to be doing in-person things? So I found the world of virtual assistants, and there's a really big community out there of people who serve other businesses through the skills that they already have. And so I know I had skills in the technical realm that some people just who are not technical people really don't want to deal with those things. And so I was able to leverage those skills and gain some clients over the summer. And so I was trying to do that at the same time as doing my full-time MBA, and it was a little bit hectic. So I guess at the beginning of 2021, I made the decision to go all in with something. And so I decided to take a pause on my MBA and to go all in with my business.
Cool. And as a kid, did you have kind of some of those entrepreneurial tendencies in terms of like wanting to start something up, or did it really kind of hit? Because yeah, with a place like Waterloo, where they have like the incubators there and a lot of the tech startups and all that, there can be more like, hey, I should do that too. Versus, you know what, as a kid growing up, you were selling, I don't know, bubble gum in the schoolyards or like stickers and this and that. Did you have any of that growing up as a kid, or?
I'm trying to think. I don't think I had any of the typical like great lemonade stands or anything like that. I did a
Yeah.
lot of like fundraising for charity and like started um like events and stuff like that. I would love to plan events and um start something new. So I would like start a musical event that became a tradition at my high school. And so there's just these things where I wanted to start stuff and be the first person to try this. And so maybe not as much the money focused, but if there was, I guess, money involved, it would usually be a fundraiser of some sort, like bake sales. But yeah, not the typical
Cool.
entrepreneurial child.
Cool. So you've gone through your journey of kind of systems engineering, product management, MBA, and now kind of all in on the entrepreneurship side. What does some of the futures hold for you now? You're still young and you still got a lot of runway to go through. But if you could kind of start planning things out, So far, so good on the entrepreneurship side, or is it still going to be a lifestyle business? Are you finding it, hey, you know what, I could be a unicorn and whatever? Or are there other things that you're kind of incubating along the way?
Yeah, I think the goal with my business right now is to learn from other small business owners. And I
Okay.
mean, in working in my co-ops in software companies, SaaS companies that work with like business owners and small businesses, I could see myself continuing along this path and really understanding um, a specific segment of small business owners, and then potentially creating solutions, whether that be service-based or product-based or software product-based, right? So I think I'm just kind of along for the ride and strategically making sure that I learn and implement what I'm learning into the next step of my business.
Cool. So I think that's great information, and we'd love to pick your brain further on kind of those major areas. So the folks that are curious about systems design, engineering, product management, MBA, and then definitely on the entrepreneurship side and kind of the learnings along the way, because it would be interesting to kind of hear about your progress and evolution if you're willing to share some of that as we go through the process. But I think that's great. Would you have any kind of general SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier, where if you could find Marisa, I don't know, maybe pre-university or maybe in university or just graduated or MBA, like a couple of those typical big milestones, and if you could, I don't know, slip her a note on a post-it or something, just something small and quick that hey, I wish someone had taught me that, or are there any kind of key defining moments where having learned this, then this has kind of set me off on a different path, but just kind of generally, and then hopefully that'll set us up for some future conversations to go into in depth a little bit more later on.
Yeah, I would definitely tell her to think more about what you actually want. I mean, there's a lot of pressure to do certain things that you get from culture or your friends or your family or even media. And so if you don't necessarily know what you want, maybe take a step take a step inward and think about it, reflect on it, write about it. I know I just did that recently because Luki suggested doing like an I want exercise where you write down, 30 times what you want. And I hadn't realized until that moment. I was like, oh, I have all these things that I want, but they're not necessarily lining up with what I'm currently doing. Or so that really helps me kind of flesh out what do I want versus what do I think I want, because this is what other people are telling me I want.
Yeah, I find that a very useful exercise, and a lot of folks or the students are like, nah, I'm too young. I don't even know why I'm in this program or whatever. But I think that's the best time for you to do it, because are you really gonna spend 4 or 5 years of your career just doing it for the sake of it, or
Yeah.
would you want to do it a little bit more purposefully, right? And
Yeah.
if you've already invested and committed the time to do it, doesn't mean you can't change it, right?
Mhm.
So the whole kind of sunk cost fallacy where for most folks they're going to be working kind of like 40 years of their careers, right? And if not longer, and that's a pretty big commitment to do on what you did for and made a decision when you were what, 16, 17. How much did we really know? So that's a great exercise. Are there other interesting things, and obviously we can get into more of them later, but are there others that you'd want to make sure that little Marisa knows?
Yeah, kind of going along with that. Once you know what you want, then any experience that you do, for example, through engineering, um, I didn't really know what I wanted, and so I wasn't taking full advantage of all of the opportunities. I mean, I learned to do that by the end of my degree, but there was a point in the middle where I was just, surviving engineering and not learning as much as I could have. So if you really know what you want, you can really take those learning experiences, but also let those learning experiences maybe shape what you want, because that does change.
That's perfect. So I think that's a few words of wisdom for younger folks who are kind of in the similar boat as yourself, making decisions from the technical side, moving to business, maybe entrepreneurship. So some considerations there. And yeah, would love to have you back for other episodes that dive a little bit more deeper in any of those topics. So thanks, Marisa, for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Luki Danu, LUKIDANU, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.